The epicenter for this plague on Americans is the Republican Party, but November may be our last chance to undo all of this. Now, the word agency is the ability the word agency, and to describe it, it's the ability to control yourself and your own life. Now, loss of agency is the psychological term for people who no longer being able to influence the course of their own life or the world around them. The phrase is often used to describe the situation of usually women suffering from severe spousal abuse, physically and psychologically beaten into submission, locked into their homes, unable to work, and afraid to even contact friends or family. But it also describes far less severe situations, like when people lose control of their work lives because of unregulated markets and they can't provide for themselves or their families because of poverty, or they want social political change but they want social or political change but they are regularly thwarted by bought off politicians. It's sometimes described as a loss of power, but it's really a whole different animal, closer to loss of self control and one's own life amidst a road going insane. Now, the piece of shit Tucker Carlson's attacks on Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, complete with his Sandy pet name for her, is a classic example of how a TV show host can convert his viewers' sense of political loss of agency into outrage. But when you step back a bit, you see the impact of the loss of agency all over the place. Now, number one, the workplace. The past 40 years of Reagan's neoliberalism have destroyed agency for millions of Americans in the workplace, as they no longer have the right to a union representing them, and they are powerless in the face of increasingly giant and monopolistic employers determined to keep the wages flat. The disempowerment of working people in America has been a long-time Republican goal. It was back in 1947 when President Harry S. Truman had vetoed the Republican-controlled Congress Taft-Hartley situation, saying in his veto message it contained seeds of discord which would plague this nation for many years to come. Republicans overruled his veto, making union busting legal in any state that they wanted to declare itself a right to work for less state. 27 states have so far adopted that rule, devastating the little agency employees had in the workplace to begin with. Number two, political bribery. 12 years since five. It's been the 12 years since five conservatives on the Supreme Court fully legalized political bribery with their Citizens United decision have seen a national loss of political agency. Politicians now regularly do what billionaires and big corporations want rather than what the people want. Now, whether it's cheaper drugs, nationwide single-payer healthcare, a cleaner environment, stronger Social Security, postal banking, higher minimum wage, low-cost high-speed broadband, mass transit, predatory bank behavior, ending student loan debt, or the breakup of giant corporations so entrepreneurialism can again blossom in America, corporations and billionaires have paid legislators to block them all in defiance of the majority of the voters. Political dysfunction, because so many politicians are now legally owned by billionaires or corporations, has left Congress polling lower than the American turning communist, which is what Richard Nixon during Watergate or the IRS. It's also frozen Congress's ability to accomplish anything of substance. Over 1,000 pieces of legislation became law in 1982, but that number has collapsed to below 200 in the past decade, particularly when you take out naming post offices and the like. American voters, feeling that loss of agency but not fully realizing its cause, have reacted by embracing the con artist politicians like Trump and his sycophants in the GOP, who offer simple slogans to solve complex problems, but others join the anti-government groups like the ones that stormed the Capitol on January 6th, or they go down the rabbit hole of the third-party politics. Number three is silencing women. Birth control pills were authorized by the FDA in 1961, although at that time multiple states had laws banning birth control altogether. Now, Connecticut, for example, made it a crime for even married couple to be in possession of condoms or any other birth control device or product. In 1965, in the Griswold vs. Connecticut case, the Supreme Court struck down those state laws across the nation, and the use of birth control for married couple over the loud objections of the Catholic Church became widespread. It wasn't until the year 1972 when the Supreme Court legalized possession of birth control for unmarried men and women in their Eisenstadt vs. Beer decision. As women gained agency over their own bodies and reproductive systems, particularly after 1973, when it became the Roe vs. Wade decision, an organized women's rights movement emerged. As all across the nation, women enrolled in college and are entered the workforce in numbers never before seen outside of wartime. The backlash from men who saw this as a loss of their own agency was immediate. The 1970s were a time of particular ferment, with the issue even making its way into presidential politics, as conservatives openly argued that a woman's place was in the home, and this radical behavior would spell the end of the nuclear family. Rush Limbaugh had referred to activist women as feminazis. Other conservative commentators suggested witches and lesbians were taking over the country, and the anti-death penalty right-to-life movement was hijacked by anti-abortion activists with the goal of putting women back under the control of their husbands in the state. Fucker's unseemly anti-AOC rant is just the latest in the long line of powerful men trashing women for declaring or living out their own agency. Astonishingly, as Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel recently pointed out, a clip at the bottom of this article, all three men running in the GOP primary to take her on in November don't want just abortion outlawed. They want Griswold vs. Connecticut overturned, so all use of birth control can again be criminalized, thus flushing women back out of the workplace. Number 4, guns and assault weapons. As men were getting hit in the workplace by right to work for less laws and Reagan's war on unions throughout the 1980s, their perceived loss of agency translated into a search for something to restore their sense of man and control. Now the toxic masculinity went national. Now guns, being the obvious stand-ins for powerful penises, they fit the bill perfectly. And when you're carrying a gun, you can not only control women and others, you can take their lives. And there is no more godlike power than the ability to instantly take a life. The men's rights and guns rights movements merged in the 1980s out of the same nest of sexual and social male insecurity. As society around them changed, gun manufacturers and their lobbying arm, the NRA, saw this as a billion-dollar opportunity. Now, the basis of the successful $73 million lawsuit just won against Remington by 9 of the Sandy Hook families was that companies advertised an assertion that owning a big gun was the key to being a real man. Ads targeting insecure men and boys promised to punch their man card, and they compared they compared gun ownership with other manly activities like eating meat instead of tofu. As the gun companies made billions of dollars in profits selling masculinity, America ended up being the only country in the world with more guns than people. Now, every year that gun sales go up, so did accidental child deaths, mass shootings, suicides, and murders. More than 40 million guns were added to America's streets just during the 2 years of the pandemic, and it's reflected in today's murder rates, which are particularly high in rural red states and the counties, and now the revival of mass school shootings by young white men that are feeling the loss of agency. Number 5 is the GOP. The epicenter for all these plagues on the American people is the Republican Party, which has since the 1920s unabashedly stood for white, wealthy, well-off men and the corporations that they run. Embracing the defiance of flight attendants displayed nearly 100% by white men, 8 Republican senators have written to the Attorney General demanding that people who sought flight crews not be put on the no-fly list. Senators Cynthia Lummis from Wyoming, Mike Lee from Utah, James Lankford from Oklahoma, Marco Rubio from Florida, Kevin Cramer from North Dakota, Ted Cruz from Texas, John Hoeven from North Dakota also, and Rick Scott from Florida, are all betting it's good politics to pander to aggrieved men who feel having to wear a mask on an airplane is an assault on their sense of agency. Ted Cruz was ranting the other day that it should be illegal for President Biden to announce that he's going to put a black woman on the Supreme Court as just the latest in the GOP's racism to put women back in their place hustle. As we noted last week, when a political party has no real policy plans or core beliefs, they fall back on demagoguery, misogyny, and racism. Richard Nixon blazed the trail with his Southern strategy. Bush the elder fine tuned in with Willie Horton, and Donald Trump laid it out right in the open for the world to see. America's in deep shit, with our political system hijacked by billionaires, culture voices like Foe, and social media sowing hate and division for profit. toxic masculinity driving these hate crimes, murders, and air rage, and more than half the country is still desperately hanging out by their fingernails if they can't deal with an unexpected $1,000 expense. Now, the progressive Democrats offer a way for Americans to recover our control of government and our agency, and thus a way towards our becoming a nation that cares for its own and works to heal rather than tear apart the American social contract. They would accomplish this by getting big money out of politics to put voters back in control of elections, while putting into place policies that I mentioned earlier, and the policies being supported by a majority of Americans. November may well be our last chance to undo much of the damage that the GOP has inflicted on us these past 40 years, and we can build, finally, a nation that truly realizes its founding promise of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So if you like the video, give the video a like and subscribe to my channel, RBW King, and you can also hit the notification bell so that you'll be notified when a new video comes out. And also, if you want to support my work even further, you can donate to my Patreon link that you can find on the About section for YouTube to donate whatever you can. And thanks for listening.